My mother lived, you think about it, she almost made 94 years. She was born in 1927. That's 2 years before the Great Depression that we all study in history. She used to tell us the story of where she was at the age of 14 when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. That is a lot of history. I have been planning this speech for over 20 years. I did my father's speech 20-something years ago. She asked me to do hers. I have enough material that I could write a book on, but I don't have enough time to do her justice. So what I would like to do is tell you some of my stories from Mama. I know every one of you in here have your own stories, and they are probably just as good and just as funny as the ones that I have. Mama was a fireball. She is what we call the Energizer Bunny. Somebody at one time gave her a doll that was the Energizer Bunny, and that's who she was. I have never in my life seen anybody with as much energy as my mother. I always envy that about her. I mean, she would go and go and go. I don't know how many of you have a Fitbit, but if my mother ever had a Fitbit, it would have died a long time before she did. My mother could outwalk, outtalk anybody that I ever met. Now, she did have a close rival with her sister Jane. And Keith knows that to be true. I used to love to see her sister and Mama get together. It was like watching a heavyweight fight of the vocal cords. They both developed an ability to be able to talk without stopping to breathe. It really was an amazing thing to see. None of us really got that talent. Now, Joel's pretty close, so he's close as any of us. But you know, sometimes traits like that, they skip generations. And Mama does have 2 grandsons. That would be Cody and Jay. They can talk the paint off a wall. So she is well represented. Talking about grandsons also, she has 11 of them. She had 4 children, 11 grandchildren. All of the grandchildren called her the junk lady. Something else about Mama, she put to lie every nutritional theory you had ever thought about and ever heard of. She ate nothing but junk her whole life. Now, some of you at Hunter Hills, you may have seen her sit down and eat a meal, but that's late in her life. Y'all caught her at the tail end. My brothers never saw her sit down and eat a meal. She was always fixing stuff for somebody else. And so they called her the junk lady because when they went over, she had cheese balls, all kinds of cookies and everything else for them to sit down, so everybody loved to go. In fact, 4 of the granddaughters got together 2 nights ago in her house and bought all the junk that she used to buy them and watched a movie, which was very cool. But she had just an incredible amount of energy. She really did. She's also, I'll throw this in there, talk about energy. Jeff and I were coming home. We had been at college. We came home. Mama's the only person. You ever seen anybody run over themselves? This is a true story. Jeff comes home. I had been home a day or so Jeff and I are out in the front yard. Mama pulls up. She hadn't seen him yet. She sees Jeff. She throws the car in park, which she really threw it in reverse instead of park. She opens the door, puts her left foot out. When her right foot comes off of the brake, the car starts rolling back. The door hits her, knocks her down. She rolls over. The left front tire rolls over her legs, and the car goes back and stops in a bush. Without missing a beat, Mama jumps up, runs over, grabs Jeff and hugs him, looks at me and says, "I meant to do that." Mama's was a hoot, and those of you that knew her, you know, you can believe those stories. Those are true. I'm not telling you anything. I'm a kind of speaker. I'll have sometimes I don't mind embellishing the truth. You know, I don't like the truth. I don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Y'all ever heard that? But all of these, I'm telling you, are true. She married one man. You know, Mama wanted to live the length and the breadth and the depth of life. She married and was married to the same man for over 50 years. And to tell you the truth, their temperaments really were not that close together. Anybody that knows? They had some ups and downs and good times and bad. But I remember when as an adult, I asked her, I said, Mama, why did you and Dad really stay together? And she looked at me and she said, well, we both made a promise to fight it out to the bitter end. And they pretty much did. She reared, some of you might think raised, but it's not right. She would always correct your grammar if you were wrong. She said, you raise corn, you rear children. So she reared 4 children, and she would run over us like a master sergeant. She took care of most of the discipline. Daddy was always kind of like the nuclear option. If we did something really bad, she'd say, I'm going to tell you Dad. And Buddy, Dad didn't play. If any of y'all knew my dad, he marched across Europe in World War II, and he didn't play. So that'd scare us to death. But most of it, she took care of herself, most of the discipline. There are times that we would get on her nerves, and she would say, get in the back room and wait till I get there. And we all knew what that meant. And we all stayed for many years in one bedroom, 2 bunk beds, 4 boys. Some of my best memories in that place. So we'd have to sit there, you know, she'd leave you there about 15, 20 minutes so you could think about it. And then she would walk in and close the door. She would have a belt in each hand. She was ambidextrous. Man, she would light into us, and we would be all look like a lion tamer. She was laying stripes on us as best we could. And then somebody, usually Joel, would make a break for the door. And he would have to take the punishment of going to the door. And after he got out, she would usually chase him around. But Mama ran a good house. She was a wonderful, wonderful mother. She was a great mother, but I tell you, she may have been the best grandmother of all time. She has 11 grandchildren. All of them are here today, and they used to love to go with Lolly. And I tell you what, every one of them have a relationship today because Mama would pick up 2 or 3 or 4 of them. I remember one time I got drafted to be the driver because I had a 15-passenger van at the time. After that trip, I sold that sucker. She wanted me to take 7 of them plus another cousin up to Cherokee, North Carolina. And we had a great time. It really was a fun trip. Lacey was the oldest. Katie was the youngest, and you had 5 boys in between. And Buddy, she was in her element. And she had a great time, and we did a lot of good things. I got tickled. They had one of those, I don't know if you've ever seen this. It used to bother Katie because Katie always seen herself as an intellectual, which she is. She's really smart. But she couldn't figure out why she couldn't beat that chicken in tic-tac-toe. I don't know if I've ever seen them in the carnivals. And that just really bothered Katie Lou. That a chicken was beating her in tic-tac-toe. 6 at this time great-grandchildren. I know she had a great relationship with them also. Her chosen profession was teaching. Many of you know her from teaching. She taught for about 40 years. Now think about this. She taught at Hopeful when Daddy was coaching there. She taught Prattville when Daddy was coaching there. She actually had a kindergarten at one time. When Jeff and I were at Lee, she taught English at Lee, which I always thought was funny because, let's be honest, none of us really talk English. We talk Southern, and Joel's got a dialect all his own. But Mama used to teach English, and it was a good time. And then she got tired of English, and she's got a master's degree in counseling. She was a counselor at Lanier, what was the other, George Washington, and other places, and many of you know her from there. But I will tell you this, and as a teacher myself, this is the kind of things that really you hold to heart because people don't say them, I think, unless they mean them. I cannot tell you the number of people that actually told me that they had my mother for whatever subject it was, and she was the best teacher they ever had. And she was excellent. Whatever she did, she tried to do an excellent job. She was a participator in life. She had incredible energy. The other thing you knew about my mother, if you knew her very long, was that she was a Christian woman. And she talked the talk, but she also walked the walk. And she was as good a Christian as anybody you'll ever see. I know her father, Pop Myers, was instrumental in buying the land that Prattville Church of Christ sits on right now, I believe. We were some of the first members for Millbrook Church of Christ, which is now Grandview Pines up the road there. But we serviced there. She was, of course, with Dale Rada, Druid Hills, and, of course, Hunter Hills, which she loved you people. So she was one of these. She would always tell us, you know, the scripture in Hebrews 10:25 says, forsake not the assembly. She thought that was the 11th commandment. And if the doors were open, she was there, and we were there. A great, great Christian lady. But I'll tell you what, the best memories I have about my mama as far as Christianity, when we were little boys, every night, the 2 bunk beds, Mama would come in and sit down on the end of the bed and read to us from the Word of Life. And that's where I've learned about God. It's where I learned about Jesus Christ. And that's where I fell in love with the Bible, as I know my brothers did. And she did that for years. I still have that Bible. And it is a great heirloom that I hope to keep for the rest of my life. Another thing about Mama, she was a great servant. She was one of these. I reminded of John 13 when Jesus washed the feet of the disciples. It's the idea of the greater serving the lesser. And that was Mama's life. She was a great person, but she was always serving people. And to give you an example of that or two, when Joel had gone to college, but Jeff and I and Jerry were living in the big house in Montgomery. It was a beautiful house, but it was an old house, and it really was cold as rip in January and February. It did not have much insulation. So when we were sitting there under 2 or 3 blankets, each of us had our own bedroom. You could hear Mama coming up the stairs about 5 in the morning. She would open the creaky door, and she would do y'all remember those gas heaters that just, you had to turn them on and put a match in it, and they go, and you felt like you was going to blow yourself up? Every morning, she would light one of those, so Jeff and Jerry and myself would not have to get up to a cold room. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Pretty cool. And every morning we would go downstairs and we would have a hot breakfast. There would be, eggs, toast, milk, and on Sunday we had those old donuts, those powdered donuts. They were so good. Always had a hot breakfast. Fast forward 50 years, when after Daddy died, we moved Mama across the street from me on Chapman Road. I have my school going, and she says, I want to help you somehow or another. And I said, Mama, you don't have to do anything. She says, I want to be a help. So y'all know how big trash cans are. After every week, she would haul the trash cans full of trash, and one of them had to tote about 100 yards. She would tote that over and put it out front. She also turned the heater on or the air conditioner or whatever I needed, so we never had to get up and go over there. And she did that until about 3 years ago, and she couldn't tote the cans anymore, but she could tote them after they were empty. And it was amazing because she would take them back. And Mama, at times, we have cameras all over our property, and we'd be sitting in a living room, and you look up at the monitor and you see a trash can going across the yard. She was so little by then, you couldn't see her. You just saw a trash can moving across the yard. That was a pretty good trick. Mama also, she was one of these people, and you might have somebody in your family, maybe you are the person, but Mama's one of these people that made you believe in prayer. When Mama started praying about things things would happen. You know, sometimes maybe the will of God, there's maybe 3 or 4 roads that you could travel, and all of them might be the will of God. But Mama could move that road to the one that you needed to go down. Where's Kyle? Y'all, you know, your whole family is because of Mama's prayer. And I don't know if you know this story, but before Kyle came on the scene, Lacey was thinking about, marrying this other guy, and she brought him to meet Mama. And Mama had a meeting with him, and after he left, she said, I don't really think I like that guy. She said, I'm going to start praying for him to be removed. I don't know who that guy is. Mama prayed him in the Never Never Land. And then Kyle comes along, and Lacey got Kyle aside and said, look, you think you're just going to meet an old lady. But this is serious business, going to meet Lolly. You better make a good impression. And of course, everybody likes Kyle, and he's got they had a great meeting, and Lolly loved Kyle, and Kyle's great. Do you remember that? Did you see that picture up there? Mama was so fun. Kyle's a big hunter, and she bought him some deer urine for a Christmas present one time. She thought that was the funniest thing. But I say that to say, Mama changed. Prayer changed things, and Mama's one of those that it would really change things. Talking about prayer and spiritual things. One reason we don't like to come to meetings like this, and because we are confronted with our own mortality. And we don't like to look at our own mortality, but I would like for you to look for a second behind me at the casket. I want you to look at the box. Because I don't care how long you live, and I do not care what you have accomplished with your life. This is where this life ends, at the box. And if death is the end, if this is the end of all of it, then life becomes meaningless. Life is a tragedy because whatever you accomplish, it ends at the box. We all look, if you live long enough, all of these blessings that we have in life, you will find that the blessings become a burden. And the biggest thing my mama did not want to be is a burden to her children. And some of you understand what I'm talking about. You can become a burden when you do not want to. And so the question that we all wrestle with is, can the burden itself become a blessing? As all of us carry our crosses of life, and all of us carry a cross, all of you deal with pain and suffering and loss and dejection and frustration and anxiety and stress. All of you carry a cross, and it ends in death. And the question we want answered more than anyone, is there a crown on the other side of the cross? And Christianity answers emphatically, yes, there is. But between the cross and the crown, there is the death and the burial and the resurrection. And we see the death and the burial from our view, but we don't get to see the resurrection from here. And it bothers some people. And we have this idea, if I could just see the resurrection. Of course, Christians say, well, Jesus came back from the dead, and Jesus showed us that there is a resurrection, but that was 2,000 years ago. Can you show me something now? And it's times like this that I would want to tell you that God says, are you kidding me? Everywhere you look, there are examples of death, burial, and resurrection. Look at the plant kingdom. You know what a seed looks like? It looks dead. It looks as dead as any rock you'll ever see. But you bury that seed. And you let God work in His time. and you can see something come up from the ground that is incredible, that is extraordinary. Think about the pecan and the pecan tree, the acorn and the oak tree, and what an incredible difference you see. But if that's not good enough for you, and we see that every day of our life, and if you don't think that God can do that, if you think He can do that for a seed, don't you think He can do it for you? Or look at the caterpillar, the most lowly of creatures that crawls around on the ground. But God puts within him the fullness of time, and he builds his own tomb. And then he buries himself. And if you've ever seen a cocoon or a chrysalis, it looks pretty dead to me. But you let God work in His time, and you see a creature come forth that is so beautiful, so rare, and is not bound by earth anymore. And if God will do that for a caterpillar, don't you think He can do it for you? Look at your own life. At conception, we are born into what we call the womb. It is a safe and secure place. It is there for us to grow and mature for a while. But then we go through a process, and if you were looking from the side of the womb, it would look just like death. Pain and suffering. And you go through the birth canal that is very constrictive, and you would say it's death. Yet we don't say it that way. We call it birth. So God has already taken you through death, burial, and resurrection. I guarantee you He'll do it one more time. In John 11, you know the story of Lazarus. And he dies. He's a friend of Jesus. Jesus comes 4 days late, and Martha kind of, in an accusatory manner, comes out and says, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. You ever felt like that? If you'd have been here, God, it wouldn't have turned out like this. My mama may not have died. My brother or sister may not have died. My child may not have died. And Jesus looked at her, and He said, your brother will rise again. And she said, I know he'll rise again on the resurrection day. And Jesus looked at her and said, I am the resurrection and the life. Whosoever believeth in me, even though he die, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Martha believed. My mother believed. I believe. But the real question is, do you? Do you believe? In John 14, the last night before the crucifixion, Jesus is talking to the apostles, trying to cram in everything He could. And He said, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Do you believe it? We are here today to witness the death and the burial. But understand that there will also be a resurrection in God's own time. I want to finish with one more story. I have a poem, and then my beautiful daughter would like to end the service with another song that Mama requested. The story is found in Genesis 32. It's the story of Jacob preparing to meet his brother Esau. I think you're familiar with the story. Jacob had to leave. They had a lot of family problems, and Jacob had to leave. He has not seen his brother in 20 years, more than 20 years. He's coming back home. The last thing his brother said to him was, I'm going to kill you the next time I see you. Unlike the world we live in, he had no communication for 20 years. He knows the next day he has sent word to his brother that he's coming home, but he does not know how it's going to go. The very next day, this is the most stressful day in his life. The very next day, it would either be light or darkness, blessing or cursing, forgiveness or vengeance, and he doesn't know. He does what many people probably would have done. He divides his family up in case he's attacked. Maybe some of them could get away. And then at night, he goes to be by himself. And there's this strange passage where he wrestles with God. Now, whether it's a man that represents God, whether it's an angel from God, or whether some people think it's a theophany, which is where Jesus Christ appeared before he was actually born. But the lesson is the same. He wrestled with God. And at one point, he even dislocated his hip. I've never had a dislocated hip, but I tell you what I heard is very, very painful. And yet, he wrestled on. At one point, the angel said to him, "Let me go." And he said, "I'm not letting you go until you bless me." And he said, "Well, what is your name?" He said, "My name is Jacob." And he said, "No longer shall it be called Jacob. It will be called Israel." That's the first place in Scripture you see the word Israel. And he says this, "Because you have struggled with God and have prevailed." That does not mean that he beat God in a wrestling match. What it means is that he persevered until he got the blessing of God. And that's what I would like to leave you with. Because life is a struggle. It is full of pain. It is full of suffering. It is full of all sorts of things. And all of it leads to the box. Don't give up on God. Even when your life seems disjointed and discombobulated, when you are hurting mentally, physically, spiritually, all over, hang on to God. When you've heard the voice that I know everyone has, "Let me go. I don't believe in God anymore. I'm not gonna mess with this anymore." Hang on to God. Through it all. Through the good and the bad. The mountaintops and the valleys. Hang on to God until you receive the blessing. And the blessing is life eternal. My mother hung on, and I guarantee you she now has life eternally with God. I got to throw this in. I was going to leave it, but it's just too good to leave out. When Mama started to go down, and she went down pretty fast in July, then we get to the first part of August. There was one day in the fall that she could not die on, and that was September the 18th. And that's because one of her grandsons was getting married. That was last Saturday. And also it was Luke's birthday. And so we said, "Mama," we didn't really say this to her, but we were thinking her, "Mama, you can die before September the 18th, or you can die after September the 18th, but don't die on the 18th. And she kept going down further and further until it was time to go. The wedding was in Florida. Everybody from the family was supposed to be there. So Jerry, bless his heart, said, "I'm not leaving. I don't think she's going to make it much longer." So he stayed back and we all went to the wedding. And Mama didn't even, Jerry had not left her bed for 3 days. And he said, "Mama, I'm going to go get something to eat." And he went to get something to eat, and that's when she passed. I don't think she wanted him to see it. And we had a camera in there, and I tried to look at that, but the lady, we had a sitter with her, the lady was with her, and you couldn't see anything because the lady blocked the view. But here's what I think happened. And I think if you search the Bible, you cannot really say that this couldn't have happened. I think Mama knew that she was not going to make it physically, but I think Mama wanted to be at that wedding. And she had it figured out. I don't know how space and time works when you die, but she left this realm about 11:40 The wedding was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but I just believe that she was there. She was there. And if you look at the date, Jay, I don't want you to ever feel sorry, because it was a great, great wedding. Jay got married, the birthday of Luke, and the birthday of my mama going to heaven. That's pretty cool, ain't it?